Hello, this is Gerald Hamas. Letters are used as orientations, but also in a way that we can make definitions with them with these letter combinations. We're not very conscious about how this works, but in a way, it's actually almost automatically that it works in a way that we make choices of orientations. And these choices are also leading to definitions. One of these choices is or options, let's say, is a better word. One of these options is that we are very sure about something, and then we can narrow it down to actually just one focus. If we're not very sure if these things will be there exactly where they are, but there are some changes there, we need the timing for it, and we need also two focuses for it. If even that is not clear enough where things are going, we have to estimate it a little bit, like we can still define something, but we should define it in such a way that we have, like the 1, 2, 3 focus, an orientation somewhere that we say, okay, it's in between this and this zone. We can still recognize the patterns well enough that I can define it in that way. So there are 3 sorts of focuses which are also related with the different frequencies, and these frequencies are also given an order into a numerical system, into a geometrical system. So actually you have really clear definitions in the end if you can do that right. If you can, but it's all about estimation still. But there are definitions. So in a way, when you have, for instance, the word at, it is a very clear definition. But where does it narrow it down? How far can we use it? How and what is necessary for the definition, and what is possible with this definition is an interesting idea. And why I will make a video about that simple word of at once more, it's because I noticed this question, which also refers to actually to my theory, which when you see it in the A and the T in my theory, where it is a reference within space of something that can be localized in space. And the question is, of course, if you really say that it is narrowed down to space, it is a bit strange, because it's also used in reality in a time context. And that is true, and that's why I have to define it, that there is a difference between the definition of the elements that you need, or the elements that can be brought into context of other things. Even there, they are narrowed down to the elements that they contain, and that's what basically at means, and you really don't need time for it. And that's what I'm going to explain in this video a bit better, because here I will read this time a couple of things here. You go and take a distance and see to all the possibilities. The A in the system is in that beginning of, let's say it could be any vibration. It's anything that is forming itself. You start from a certain center, a starting point that you can read in the system. But from there onwards, there can grow all other things from it. A lot of things can grow for it. It's basically simply at the beginning of a process, but only as an initial point. It's in that way, when you have a wave that comes forth from it, this wave will not be powerful enough to be self-maintaining. We are in a position, in a mindset of we want to discover what's going on, and at that point we want to be objective. We want to be sure that it is narrowed down to be something which is fixed. But at that point, in the first letter of this whole system, we still cannot be sure, because we're forming an objective. We're forming the idea of a fixed point. And like in numerology, which is basically behind this whole system, it starts from 0 and it goes towards 1, to a definition, to form a definition, which is the number 1, which is the number the letter T, by the way. And that's its objective. So we're having an objective that we want to go towards a definition. That's already one thing that you can derive from it. So what is then at really, and what is it referring to? We will define it even better at that point. Let's find out also what its range is. From where to where can we find at? And can we find it everywhere, anywhere? Do we need, is it always in space, or can we also define it into timing, into context? And what are the consequences if we do so? What is it really range of its definition itself, its elements? So we now first talk about the elements, and then about what's the range of where we can find the element, and if we find the element anywhere, everywhere, what's the consequence, and what's the basics of that focus. There are again 3 sorts of focuses. The one focus is that focus of measurements, let's say in space, of localizations in space. The other option is that you have 1, 2 focuses, which you deal with 2 focuses, and then you deal with timings or directions. So you have a timing with, yes, it starts somewhere and it goes to somewhere else. So you need 2 focuses. That's the different focuses. Or you refocus everything into the 1, 2, 3 option, so that you find the moment that matters at that point via a definition which is defined via context. That's okay. Now it sounds abstract, but we don't need that one now. What we need now, and that's what I'm going to explain even better now, is only this focus into one point only. And basically, focusing into one point is like the measurement in space, finding measurements in space, because that's how that works. Space has 3 dimensions, and it all is focused from a 0 point, a middle point, where we will find any localization, any place, any placement, any measurements from that point onwards. So the A is a starting point where we have a reference, a global reference of a 3-dimensional space in which we find one spot, one point with its surroundings, what we go towards that spot. It's a bit like I'm going towards that spot. And I will maintain it also on a horizontal plane in the background. But that's all things that you can add in the background. It's not that necessary. The necessary thing is the point which goes from 0 to 1, a starting point. The next letter will be the letter T. So if I go from there, I will actually, in the background there's also the vertical, but I will go actually to the point where I notice the number 1, so the quality. I notice what is the definition. In A, I'm forming a definition. I am centralizing, trying to centralize my focus, or centralize it somewhere. But with T, I centralize with A. From A, I can really centralize it, and I can find the place, the localization, really. So the localization of a centralized point, or trying to centralize it, will be able to centralize it as well. So of course there will still be the I'm going to find my definition is still there because of the A, but in T it is I found the definition. So at, in that way, is about T position, which is exactly defined. Now, of course, in general, in the middle. So because 0 becomes 1, 0 becomes 1 is A, t is 1. So where 0 becomes 1 becomes 1, or our definition. I find the definition or the centralized position of my focus. And that's generally in space. Yeah, but as a pattern, you have now a pattern, we have a definition, we have the definition of the elements, which is always beyond it, and that's what is also necessary. I once made a video about that, about all these layers on top of each other. Makes it quite difficult to do so, but all the things are there at once. Of course, you have, but here is a focus in space, and the horizontal, vertical, diagonal are directions. They are in the background, so they are not so necessary. They are points of positions in space, but behind that is also the horizontal, vertical, diagonal, because that's the global thing, the global, if you really needed to say, okay, but where am I? You can use that. That's in the background. Timing is timing or directions. Timing uses directions. In the space where everything is fixed, you really don't need directions, but you can use the directions. So, of course, you can use timing, but at that point where you have fixed places, you don't really need timing. It's like you're always in the now moment as ever. So as a pattern, you can use it in timing, you can use it in context, but these things are in the background. The range of focus for the definition will limit itself only to the point of measurements. I'm going to go to my definition of measurements. That's why it is related with space, not with time, not with context, although in the background they are available. So what's the real range then of at? You have that in the middle, but you have that also like the t will go up, and as long as I have here a range that I will keep my middle, and I will keep it within the range of the body, let's say I have it within the body of space, I have a middle somewhere, or I'm very focused and I really have at the middle. When I'm less focused, it can go away, and it is a bit up, and it's also going further away, and so on. It is a bit further away, but it is still at a center. Now this question again. So, but the reality says at can be used also for timing, because we not only at a place, we can also be at a certain time, or we at there's timing involved in so. But what I express here is not just only having a reference to space. It's also a reference to the space of the things that lie before you. So what are you going to do about that now? Because that's what it basically is expressing here. Very clear, it's very, very correct. And that's true that it is presented in that way, and that's true that that is the definition itself. Because it's about the measurements that you need. Of course, space itself is not just the space before you, but it's space, the space is everywhere. With A and T as the foundations of expressions, they still, as definition, they only lie in space itself as measurements. If you go to see the large space and see where the space can be measured and where space can be used, you also make connections not only to what lies before you, but also to things that connects you to other people, to other environments, to larger references, and these references already go into the frame of the 1-2. So me and you, for instance, or my environment, your environment. And the more that you widen this, you're going to include the timings that you need there from here to there, and so on. Once you start to do that, the timings will be involved, but it's still space. You can enlarge space, you can see that space, but the measurements are in that way still the same, but they are connecting to more things at that point. The connections go towards timing, where in the reality the point of reference of at will remain in the middle, and the timings will remain neutral. So in a way, you're always at the moment, just the moment. You don't really need time. You don't really need that timing, like you say, okay, it's before and after. It's you and me. It's my environment, your environment. And you're at the position. It expresses itself from there, but you can enlarge its context. So that's why you have a definition, but you also have a possibility, a potential to include it into other positions or in bigger positions. The definition itself is fixed, while it is still open to its potential to include timing, to include context. So when I do that, when I'm not really very fixed in at the middle, and I have my at somewhere else already, then this at is also not just further up in space, further away in space. It also allows this idea that it's also further away. Its local context remain the same within its spatial measurements, while its full range of bigger context allows it as well to involve a time-based context potential, because in fact I need more time to get there, but that's in the background. It's still at a position. The measurements of at remain within the neutral moment as well, or perspective. The perspective is in space. The now moment is actually the most neutral time-based moment, because it's still into one point. It doesn't need a before and after for its measurements. It does not really need the focus of the time element, of the 1-2 element, like that exists to measure timings. Here we're measuring focus. The one focuses, the two focuses, or the timing needs always these two parts, the before and after, and then it's going to calculate some logic from there. Here it's just always at one moment, at a neutralized timing. So yes, you can involve timing, but timing here is neutral. It doesn't need that dealing with these elements of what time is involved in. All the measurements that deal with how we measure time is not involved. That's why at is not about something that needs timings. And also we could not only include timing. In here the timing is always that neutral point. We can also include the potential context. How do we use the potential context? We can use at, in this case, as a pattern, which we can use everywhere. And yes, we can do that. We can use that everywhere, anywhere, and at any time, at any place, always. But at the same time, the definition itself will still stand, and it will remain that it's about measurements of how we define the elements, like in a spatial kind of reference, and where the timing, if we involve it, will be derived to a neutralized now moment, even via context. And when we come to another place, another time, it's still within that particular now moment. So when the at is used as a definition, we're actually looking for the definition, and when we finally find a definition, even if it's somewhere in a different timing and at a different time and at a different place because of my context, what shall I do? What shall be done? The definition itself will be derived to what I'm already focusing upon there in the middle. It's about measuring the definition, trying to measure my definition of a position. So basically, even when we allow context, also context is not needed. It's not needed. You don't need context before to realize what at is already there. We can use time for it, and then it's still the same thing. The definition itself does not acquire the context, so we're not going to need context first before we have it. It's only about measuring a definition to focus upon and to start from. So basically, you can still see that here. It's all about what our measurements needs, and even when we're not sure if it will be the same the whole time and so on, it will always be that focus of a starting point A with a definition T and nothing more, and that's our foundation where to work with, and these are the elements that are fixed. And even if we use them anywhere, which we can do, even if we use them in a time context, in a bigger context where we even displace that point of at on its own is always the same thing, and that's a definition which basically it can be defined with these measurements that are defined as how we define them in space. So I hope this was a good answer to the question that I have noticed, if this really was the question, but that's the question that I noticed that could be interesting to answer. Anyhow, there are some books to help you to get used to the whole system. There's a Soundinform website with previous videos, and you can subscribe to the YouTube channel if you like. Thanks again for watching. Bye.